Good morning. I think it's just about 12, and I think we all ought to have our lunch bag beside us because it's also called the lunch edition of the UN75 dialogue. Good morning, Zana. You're with us. Zana, can you unmute?
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Miss Carolyn.
Good morning, Zana.
Good morning.
And I just was checking to make sure that you are with us. I see Zana. But ensuring, and it's just about 12 o'clock, as I have said, and we are now getting ready to start because it's 12 and we had put this as a lunch edition. I am figuring there will be some more people who have signed up and who will be joining us, but to keep our conversation on time and to get our conversation going, I want to start by welcoming each and every one of you to our second UN75 conversation, open dialogue. Morning, I thought I was conversing with people and then I saw I was on mute. So I think I am back on track. So good morning again and welcome to our second UN75 dialogue conversation on shaping Belize, the future of Belize and the future of the world to be a better place for us to live. We all know that today we are confronted with so many issues, so many challenges, both individually, as a family, as a community, and as a country. We see it all around us. Some, of course, we know are historically rooted, systemic, legacies of colonialism, of slavery, cemented over time, for example, gender inequality, while others are contemporary, crime and violence, COVID-19, and as we can see, the recent flooding that has taken over Belize and much of Central America. And then we see those that are emerging on the horizon, already with us in some cases, like demographics, they're shifting, climate change. But there are also opportunities as we continue to develop as a nation and as a global community, as we continue to address these issues. We see opportunities, for example, like in technology, where technology can be used to address the gender gap, to look at leapfrogging education, for example. So we are seeing lots of risks that are confronting us, lots of challenges, but certainly lots of opportunities. And so today is really an opportunity for us to localize that global conversation on shaping the future for us and the world, as well as shaping the organizations that are expected to deliver this future. The United Nations, of course, being very vital to this process. So having done a little welcome there, I want to now ask the representative of the United Nations who is with us today, Tracy Hutchison, and she will be giving us some opening remarks. Tracy?
Pleasant good morning, Carolyn, and everyone on this call this morning. Thank you so much. You've given the opening remarks, really. Very, very important words to share with everyone taking the time to join us this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. So pleasant good morning, all. To mark the 75th anniversary, this year in 2020, the United Nations has ignited what we refer to as a people's debate. Launched by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, it promises to be the largest and furthest reaching global conversation ever on building the future we want. So for us, it is a listening moment for the United Nations. As Carolyn shared just now in her brief words, there are several dramatic changes and complex challenges that are facing us, not just from climate crisis to population shifts, changes in the course of technology, and we need to collectively look for actions around these areas. Through this UN75 initiative, the United Nations will encourage people to put their heads together to define how enhanced international cooperation can help to realize a better world by 2045, when the UN completes 100. So at this pivotal moment in history, we're using these dialogues to really answer and ask three big questions. What kind of future do we want to create? Are we on track? What action is needed to bridge the gap? COVID-19 is a stark reminder of the need for cooperation across borders, across sectors, and importantly, across generations. So 2020 must be a year when we all come together, not just as a global family, but even within the spheres of our national context here in Belize, to discuss how we can work together more effectively to manage these issues. Sharing your ideas, your hopes, your fears, and solutions are more important now more than ever. Your voice is important to us here in the United Nations in Belize. It will help us to understand how the UN better work with all partners for people, for peace, for prosperity, and the planet through partnerships for sustainable development. I'm really happy that you have decided to join the conversation today. I hope we can continue the dialogue beyond today and into the new year. So really wishing you a great conversation to everyone joining this afternoon. Keep safe during these critical times of COVID-19 and continue to engage in these conversations as they go forward. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy, for those words, inspiring, putting us with some very key message. And perhaps the three questions, just to repeat what Tracy has said, it's a pivotal moment in history, and UN is asking these three big questions. What kind of future do we want to create? Are we on track? And what action is needed to bridge that gap? So as we get ready to really get caught up in this lovely, great conversation, which I have no doubt after the last one we have, and Zana can testify to this, was very enjoyable and exciting. We certainly want to do something just at the very onset and to remind you that we have asked that persons who have not registered yet, we'll be putting the link in the chat. If you did not register, if you can please register using that particular link, because we really want to capture the fact that you participated with us. And as important, we want to capture what are the issues and what are the concerns and what are the solutions, because this is not just about issues and challenges. This is also about solution searching to shape the future that we want to have. So one, I'm going to therefore ask if you can take a quick 1 minute if you haven't filled out the form, and if you can please do so. So having said that, we'll just take 1 minute and allow for that to happen. And I see that Zana has put the link in the chat. So if you can just click on it, and it should take you to the form. And if you can just please fill it out. So we'll give it 1 minute, and then we will continue with the conversation. Okay, I think that 1 minute is more or less up. And if you have not finished, just continue on, and we're going to continue with the agenda as we have set it out. Now, Tracy brought up these three great questions. What kind of future do we want to create? Are we on track? And what action is needed to bridge the gap? So I wanted to start this conversation in terms of discussing priorities. But priorities are also shaped by a vision, a future that you want to see, because whatever decisions we make today will influence and shape what the future is going to be. Now, let's start with what if. I like to start the what if conversation because what if says to me, what is this vision that I want to see and what needs to be in place to create this vision? So if we're talking about the future, we need to have an appreciation and an understanding of that future that we want to see. So the what if moment speaks to what if something is in place, what can that contribute to the future? So I want each and every one of us who are participating today to start thinking of the what if moment and to use the what if moment to either place your comment in the chat or to unmute, and Zana is going to keep us grounded in terms of who is unmuting so that they can speak to their what if moment. Why the what if moment? Like I said, it's really about what is the difference that needs to happen? What is the change that needs to happen to bring the future about today? So my what if moment, for example, can be, what if there was no corruption in Belize? What would Belize be like today? So think about it. What if there was no corruption in Belize? And what if there was no corruption in other countries? What would Belize and the global community look like today? As Tracy once said, things can be complex and there are multiple issues that are confronting us. But that's basically my what if question. So let's hear from you. What is your what if question? And I want to start seeing some notes in the chat, and you can unmute if you want to speak to your what if moment. So we're already beginning to see some what if in the moment. And so we started with Caleb is saying, what is rights enforcement? What if rights enforcement was tech-based and efficient? Imagine what the Belize would be. Anyone else wish to add their what if moment? Please unmute and let's start hearing from you. Zana, we have anybody who has unmuted?
No, Miss Carolyn. We're still awaiting if anyone would like to say any words.
Excellent. And what we also want to do at this point in time is to throw a polling question at you. What is that question? While we think about that moment, we can also look at the polling question. Our first polling question then comes, did you know about—
Miss Carolyn, we have
Yes.
Karen who has just unmuted.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so can we have Karen? Can you talk about your what if moment?
Thank you, Carolyn. I would say, what if all the laws that we had in Belize were implemented and all the development plans were implemented?
Wow, that's a powerful one. What if all the laws in Belize were implemented and what if all the development plans were implemented? What a Belize we would have, because many development plans have been produced for the country as a whole. We have had plans for communities, for municipalities, but these plans have not been implemented as perhaps they should. In addition, we have many laws. Sandra Miranda is saying, what if the several laws in Belize were enforced fairly with no political intervention? That's another interesting one. What if the several laws in Belize were enforced? Another one, what if LGBT Belizeans became visible members of cabinet? What if LGBT Belizeans became visible members of cabinet? Now, these are some interesting what if moments. And Zana has posted the poll for us where we are asking, did you know about the UN75 dialogue before this invitation? So continue to post your comments. We're going to give a few minutes more of the what if moment. We've seen some already. What if rights enforcement was tech-based? What if several laws were enforced without political intervention? What if LGBT Belizeans became visible members of the cabinet? And of course, the poll is going, and what we're seeing is that it says the question was, did you know about the UN75 dialogue before this invitation? And we're seeing it's almost even between the yes and the no. So Zana, do we have anyone else who has unmuted? Anyone else wants to write in their what if moment?
No
Anybody
unmutes
else?
yet, Miss Carolyn.
No one else?
Good afternoon.
What
We
if?
have one.
Okay. That is Roxanne from the Belize Assembly for Persons with Diverse Abilities. Give us your what if moment, Roxanne.
Good afternoon. Definitely our what if would be, what if persons with disabilities was included in the national budget? That
Wow,
would be
that's
a
a good
historical
one.
moment for us.
Wow, that's a good one. What if, can you repeat that one for us, Roxanne?
What if persons with disabilities was included in the national budget?
What if persons with disabilities would be included in the national budget? And perhaps you can maybe give us a little bit more that if it was included, what would have happened?
Well, definitely supplemental income for persons with disabilities is the first step that we would ask for. Employment for persons with disabilities, inclusion when it comes to accessibility to public spaces is a must. And BAPTA, of course, reaching the level of having our own space and making international contacts to have outreach and missions that assist people with disabilities.
You went off a little bit there, a little bit of...
I'm sorry, for services that is not being offered in the country.
Wonderful. And so basically, what Roxanne is saying that if there was a budget, if there was a space within the national budget that addresses issues for persons with disabilities, certainly Belize would be a better place because it would be a more inclusive society, ensuring that persons with diverse ability are engaged in decision making, and they're also able to work, they're also be independent, and so on and so forth. We have another what if. What if 50% of parliament was made up of women? What if the police use reasoning rather than brute force to uphold the dignity and rights of all? So these are some very great what if moments. And basically what we're saying is that if these things were in place, certainly our country and the global space would have perhaps been a better place where people could be enjoying a high quality of life. Now, we've also done the survey, and so what we've seen is that, at least at what the last count I saw, Zana, was that it was equal in terms of who had heard about the dialogue before and who have not heard about the dialogue before. So let's now move along in terms of this great discussion that we're having, because the what if moment then translates to something else. We all know that we're confronted with many issues as we continue to see. And I have highlighted some. Tracy from the UN has also highlighted others. In your what if moments, you have highlighted some of the underlying issues and challenges that confronts us. So we know that in Belize, there are issues that are confronting us. And we know within the global space, there's also issues that are confronting us. But whenever we do any programs, whenever we do any projects, this is what is going to influence and shape those programs and projects in terms of what can be implemented now and what can be implemented towards the future. So we want to then start another conversation leading and segueing from this as to say, if as members of Belizeans, as members of the global community, what should be the immediate priority actions the government of Belize and the United Nations should address at this time? So we've discussed a few of these, and I'm now going to put up another poll Zana is going to put up another poll for us. And that poll is going to ask the question, what should be the immediate priority actions of the government of Belize and the United Nations to address these challenges? And we're then going to start talking about why we are looking at these as immediate priority actions. So we started that conversation. Some of you have already put in some of the issues, some of the challenges that we are confronted with today. I have spoken about some of them. Tracy has spoken about some of them. Now we're beginning to have a conversation that leads from that, which is starting to say, if you are advising the government of Belize, and if you are advising the Secretary General of the United Nations, what should the immediate priority actions of the government of Belize and United Nations be to address these challenges? You can put it in the chat, or we prefer that you click on the link and you vote you on the polling question, and by clicking on the link and the polling question, we'll be able to see what are some of the common threads and some of the issues that you believe that the government of Belize and the United Nations should be addressing now. So Zana, we have up that particular polling question. And we also got a what if moment, another what if moment. What if parents that have children with special needs will have institutions and resources to turn to? That's a great what if moment again. What if parents that have children with special needs will have institutions and resources to turn to? Another great what if moment that we are getting. And so having spoken about these what if moments, let's start talking about the immediate priority action that you want to see to address these issues that you're raising. So the poll is on. Someone has put in the chat, I think that we should address crime situation. So they see crime as an immediate priority for which action ought to be taken. And we're beginning to see some comments jumping out. In the poll, we see support mothers, we see inclusiveness, we see agriculture, we see advance the EOB. I think that means the Equal Opportunities Bill. I see education, fairness, create wealth, healthcare, domesticate the UNCRPD. That means United Nations Convention on the Rights of Differently Able Persons. I see education, though. Education is really coming up big, that people are saying, our participants are saying, education ought to be part of our immediate priority action. I see, let us see, environment, healthcare, honesty. Honesty, I see fairness, lobby cabinet for healthcare. So we're seeing quite a basic income. Okay, basic income should be a immediate priority. So what we're going to start doing now is we're going to ask you all to unmute your mic one at a time. Zana will be monitoring that because we're seeing it, but we also want to hear the why. Why are you suggesting these as a priority, considering all the issues that are now confronting us, that you all have been talking about, that I have been mentioning, that Tracy has been mentioning? Why are we taking on these or why are we suggesting to the UN that these ought to be our immediate priority actions? And so I'm going to ask us to start unmuting, and Zana will be monitoring the unmuting so we can start hearing individually from you what are your reasoning, the whys of why you're making these recommendations for immediate priority actions. Zana?
First, we have Bapta.
Okay, wonderful. For me, that priority would.
Okay.
Why
Who
is
do we
important?
start with?
Bapta.
Okay.
If a person's. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you. It's raining, at least in our neck of the woods. So we're hoping that the rain won't affect the internet connection. But go ahead, Roxanne.
Well, for disabilities, Carolyn, we have been having this conversation for the last 25 to 30 years. There was a framework put together for persons with disabilities that was never implemented. And so for us, the time for talking is over. It's now time for action. And so sensitizing and lobbying at the cabinet level for the issues of persons with disabilities is where we need to go forward when it comes to not only the United Nations, but in every other countries, and especially countries that has signed on to the United Nations Convention on the rights of persons with disabilities. Locally, it's a strategic step for us now to sign on to the optional protocol of the, because even though it was signed and ratified in Belize, the optional protocol was not signed on. And so it's important for us to now form a steering committee for that process to be completed. Without those two steps of us moving forward into 2021, really, we're just going to be having this conversation next year with the same amount of people moving nowhere.
Thank you, Roxanne. That's a great rationale as to why you have put in your in the chat and in the polling what should be the immediate priority action. And that, of course, is coming from the perspective of BACTA, which is the Belize Assembly for Persons with Diverse Abilities. Is it diverse abilities, Roxanne? Roxanne? I'm hoping I am, hello?
Yes, Caroline, that is correct.
Excellent, thanks a lot. So who else do we have who is unmuted? Anyone else want to give their why? Zana?
We have Ian.
Ian?
Hello, Miss Carolyn.
Okay,
Ian. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, can you say where you? Yes, we're hearing you.
All right, I am Mr. Cato from the University of the West Indies Open Campus. That's me. I suggested UNCAC just in the sense that I think if we have some mechanism in place that would definitely punish those who are found guilty of corruption, or especially our leaders, if we have something tangible, we know, we could see that, all right, if you're you're given a temporary job for 5 years, and if they find you guilty of a crime and you actually get locked up for it, I think that would be, it sends a bigger picture in the overall public service. I was in the public service for 12 years, and if you see the corruption at the top, eventually it trickles down to the bottom. So if you have some mechanism in place, I believe, so to capture.
Excellent, wonderful. So,
and you get punished for it, I think we would have a better society, most definitely. I really believe that.
And do you see that as an immediate priority for Belize? That's what you're saying.
Yes, I really do, because based on past governments, and so there's a lot to be desired. There's a lot that happened that we are not privy to. There's a lot of fleecing, and we see a lot of poverty that shouldn't be, because we see money, or we hear about money, and where did they go? That type of stuff. But somebody have to be accountable for it. But at the end of the day, it's us, the working class, who still have to pay for it. And that to me is not fair. Any at all.
Okay. So that's a great connection you're also making between the UNCAC issues, governance issues, accountability issues, and you're linking it back to issues like poverty and the plight of the working class. That is great contribution. Who else do we have? Anybody? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. But anyone, mics on mute, that would like to continue to contribute to this conversation, why you have placed what you did in the polling as to what should be the immediate priority action to address the challenges which you were talking about in your what if moment. Because in your what if moment, you were saying if these things were in place, then this would have been the scenario. So clearly, that then becomes an issue that we have to overcome, and you're identifying some key actions that you feel will overcome some of these issues. We have Karen.
Yes, Carolyn. So the three that I had suggested, number one, education, because I believe that if we educate our people that they have options in the technical and non-technical fields, then they are able to build themselves, they can build their family, they can build their community, they can build the country. The second one is wealth creation, and I purposely did not say poverty because I don't think we should be focusing on poverty. Instead, focus on how can we build the wealth among our people. Our people should not be depending on political handouts. Each of us should be able to do the things that we need to for health, for family. And I see a lot of the issues affecting us and due to issues of poverty and not having adequate options. And thirdly, the environment, because at the end of the day, if we do not protect our environment, we cannot sustain ourselves long term.
Wonderful. Those are three great points in terms of what priority actions should be. One of the key challenges that currently confronts us today, and everything that clearly has been said and is been said, is linked to the state of Belize. And as we watch what is happening around us, whether it's the flooding that we have said, whether it's the crime and violence, whether it's the impact of COVID and how it has changed the way we do things, we're seeing all of these things confronting us today. And clearly some of the immediate priority actions that you're pointing to is how we can address some of these challenges and how the UN can design and shape its programs and projects in terms of identifying what would be these priority actions to address these. Do we have anyone else who would like to add to the conversation? Anyone else who's mic is
Previously,
on
we
mute?
had Faye, Miss Carolyn.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Previously, we had Faye. I see she's unmuted again.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm the one who put the what if for children with special needs, and I guess it follows on with the same situation that BAPTA really has. I have a child with special needs. She's now 25 years old, and parents who are having kids with special needs are having the same issues that I had back then. Nothing has really changed or developed in terms of where parents can really turn to. Yes, I guess there has been a bit because we have like the Inspiration Center right now, and we have some classrooms, but where we are from 25 years ago is not anything near where I believe as a country really should be. So one of the things I put in is that maybe the government need to do a statistics and really find out where we are in terms of, persons with special needs within the country. At one time, there was a department set aside for persons with disabilities, at least a section. There's nothing like that now. So it's like, there's no one-stop shop whereby parents can actually go to and maybe get resources when it comes to how can they educate their child? Which school can they really go to? What therapy is available? And different things like that. So those are things that are really, really essential and necessary when it comes to taking care of these kids after they've passed school age. I mean, many of them haven't been able to go to school depending on their special needs or disability. But once a parent concern is that once they have passed on from this life, what will happen to my child? Is there any kind of resources? And I think
Yeah.
Bapta mentioned this in place that whereby these kids they will probably be grown. Mine is 25 years old right now, but she's still at home. She's a child as far as I'm concerned. Who will take care of her? You know, what financial resources would be in place to really maybe even have someone take care of her? Is there an institution that they could go to? So these things are extreme. These are lacking in Belize, and I think it's time that things are put in place when it comes to this. That's my input.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks a lot. And that, just as you quite said, has linked back to what are some of the issues that BAPTA has raised as well. Perhaps we can take just a quick point in terms of looking at what has transpired over this COVID-19 period for persons with special needs, persons with diverse abilities, persons in terms of issues of healthcare and so on and so forth. Can any one person perhaps respond to that in terms of what would be a immediate priority action that is linked to that you would want to see?
Before that, Miss Caroline, we have Caleb Orozco who raised
okay.
hand, and Bapta who's on mute.
Okay, so let's start with Caleb and then we go to Bapta. Caleb, can you unmute? Thank you. You're back on mute, Caleb. You haven't unmuted.
Oh, Jesus. All right. I'm here.
Yes, go ahead.
So to answer your question, nothing. People will die before the system will actually get to the people that needs the help. That's just how it is. I'm listening to the lady and I realize that there's a chicken and egg situation. How do you enforce your civil and political rights when you already don't have much to lean on in the first place? As a country, we don't have any social safety net. If you don't have family, don't expect the state to help you out that much. You are to scramble for yourself. So with that said, what I'm looking at are the intersectional issues, and the intersectional issues for me are grounded in human rights and dignity. Where you don't have an enforcement mechanism, in this case, we don't have enforcement mechanism for no population. For disabilities, you could get raped 5 times, and that's it. For LGBT, COVID could affect the Belize blood bank, and you need brain surgery, and the doctor will do nothing other than tell you, sorry, there's no blood at the moment. Oh, and I'm being sarcastic,
Wow,
but
okay.
in this regard, for COVID, I had a young person with who needing brain surgery, and they tell me they don't know what's happening to the blood bank. If I never called the
Wow.
higher ups to find out what go on, I wouldn't have known that COVID Belize was affected. The blood bank was affected by COVID in Belize. I was mad. But the point is, what this lady just talked about is we have a concern, but we're not at the table. We feel marginalized, but we don't have a voice, and we're waiting for somebody to give you. If I had waited for somebody to give me my voice, I would be dead. And that's the problem. We have a colonial mindset that says we must be instructed by UN systems, by government. We must wait for government to be courteous enough to remember us as citizens. I say no. We are on the front lines as citizens, and we decide whether government stays in or out and what they do. But we must be willing to mobilize and be more proactive and assertive in our citizenship. The sad thing here is that nobody in this group have ever recognized that the frontline warriors of governance is us, not government. And the bias, there's all this psychological bias. Well, we can't talk to the disability people, we can't talk to the gay people. And if you're a sex worker, you're not exactly a full woman, or you don't exist in policy, you don't exist in exactly in UN gender issues. Oh, and when you talk about the gender policy, they take you out because it's too controversial. Yet we're talking about gender issues. And so when you, for me, when you render your citizens expendable, you're telling me that you've created a system to deliberately marginalize and divide your population so that they could get crumbs. Crumbs. And we as citizens have accepted those crumbs from generation to generation, wondering why things don't change. Things don't change because we don't stand up for ourselves. Simple as that.
All right. All right, thank you, Caleb, for those words. I think basically what you're saying a lot then relies on the citizens to recognize that they have a role to play in terms of being gatekeepers to a governance system. Roxanne, could you wanted to capture something, and then we go into a second polling question where we'll be asking you about 2045. So we'll capture what Roxanne has to say, and then we move into that third polling question that we want to get to. So Roxanne, you wanted to add something?
Thank you, Carolyn. I put on the chat Baptist's email address and the phone number. I would really like to hear from that parent and to make that connection. What she said is so true. It's been many years, and she firsthand knows there hasn't been support for children with disabilities past 16. One of the things the country needs is a national survey for an assessment of persons with disabilities. The Statistics Institute of Belize does a survey, and the one that as if you're high function, low function, or no function. And so it's there. Now, what
you're breaking up on us, Roxanne, a bit. Hello? Okay, Roxanne, I'm going to ask you if you can put your info in the chat for us because you're breaking up. We're not hearing you, but I think the information is important. So if you could put it in the chat, we didn't get the last part at all.
Okay, sure.
At least I didn't get it. So if you could put it in the chat for us so we could record it, that would be great. And then we move on to our third polling question. And this is important because we want to have hope. And I think Tracy pointed out in her statement, in her opening remarks, it's about despair. So we want to hear about the issues, but we also want to have hope for a future. And the whole idea about having hope for the future is about being optimistic, and it's about shaping that future, because I think Caleb's point is quite on point in saying that if we as individuals, as citizens, don't mobilize, don't organize, and start becoming gatekeepers, then the future is going to be designed for us. And I think UN75 gives us a great opportunity in order for us to start thinking of the future we want to see and to start from now in terms of shaping that future. Now, so a polling question number 3, do you think in 2045, the people of Belize and in the world will be better off, will be worse off than today, or will they be the same as today? So we want you to respond. Do you think in 2045, and in 2045, that will be 25 years from now, and that will be when UN will be celebrating its 100th year in existence. So do you think in 2045, the people in Belize and in the world will be better off, will be worse off than today, or the same as today? So let's see your votes. And how we answer basically says to us, our hope for change and our whether we are optimistic about the future, whether we are basically saying we're not optimistic at all, we have no hope for change. So we're seeing the majority of persons saying that they're better off, that they'll be better off. We see some saying that it will be the same, and less saying that they are going to be worse off. So better off seems to be what we're seeing the most of. And these polls are very interesting. And it's great that we can see the results immediately. So we can start thinking as well as to why we are saying that we feel optimistic, why we're saying it's going to be the same, and why we're saying that we could be worse off. So great, thanks for that, Zana. We can now then go into a brief conversation and a discussion as to why. Why did you say we are going to be better off? Why did you say you're going to be the same? And why did you say that you're going to be worse off? So if you can unmute, Zana is going to pick up the ones who have been unmuted. And we want to hear about from maybe 2 or 3 of you before we move into our another session, which is going to be looking at the priority that we would want to see, priority actions for the future. So let's start talking about why you believe in 2045 you're going to be better off, why you feel that it's going to be the same, or why you feel that it's going to be worse off. So Zana, anybody have their mic unmuted?
We have Caleb.
Okay, so Caleb, can you start the conversation? Sharing your why?
The first one is technology is moving at the speed of light. And because our country is a small country, they're smart young people who will efficiently use technology to improve governance, advocate for legal reform, improve our justice system, that kind of thing. And the old colonial people would have dropped dead since then. Second, the conservative colonial thinking of act like you put your head in the sand and pretend the problem will go away, is going to change to one of transparent information exchange that allows people to discuss even the most taboo thing. The problem here is that the colonial mentality of being a good house slave continues from generation to generation, and it will take a few people who are not of the house slave mentality to challenge our current system. And I think there's hope, because it only takes a few people to challenge the rest who are good house slaves to do better for themselves.
Okay, thanks, Caleb, for that contribution. So Caleb is saying he has hope for a better future. Can we have someone else? So anybody else who has unmuted, you can also put in the chat the reason for your polling decision as to why you feel we may have been better off, and why you feel we'll be better off in 2045, or why you think that we'll be the same as today in 2045, or why we'll be worse off. So do we have anyone else who would want to share the reasoning or the rationale behind why they voted the way they voted? Anyone else? Anybody have their mute off?
No, Miss Carolyn.
Okay, so you have polled, and the poll clearly is very interesting in terms of the better off there seem to be an optimism, and there seemed to be a hope that in 2045, Belize and the world is going to be a better place for us all. And that's great, because we can then now start talking. If we believe that in 2045, the world is going to be a better place for us, that Belize is going to be a better place for us, then we need to start talking about what are going to be the priority actions that the government and the UN should take in order to deliver on this optimism? So you're saying that, fine, we're feeling that this Belize is going to be better off, or Belize is going to be worse off, or whether it's going to be the same. But what should be those priority actions in order to ensure that we deliver by 2045? Because currently we have shared some issues. We have shared governance issues, we have shared education issues, we have shared healthcare issues, we have shared how issues and challenges and sectors intersect, because poverty, we've looked at poverty within the context of education, of employment, of healthcare. We know COVID-19 is creating havoc amongst our economy. It's creating havoc in our healthcare system. So at the end of the day, we've spoke about what needs to be done now, but we must also start talking about what needs to be done in the future to ensure that we deliver on those sustainable development goals. One of the points that Tracy raised was that, are we on track? We know that we are moving towards, or we want to deliver on gender equality. No. And so we want to deliver on poverty, reducing poverty. We want to reduce the gap in terms of education. We want to ensure that technology is used wisely to leapfrog learning and transparency in governance and so on and so forth. So what should that future priority action be? And that now becomes our poll. So Zana is going to put it in the chat. What that poll is going to look like will depend on you. So can you click on that link? That will speak to what should be the future priority actions of the government of Belize and the challenges of today and the future. So if you are sitting in front of the Prime Minister of Belize, or sitting in front of the Secretary General of the United Nations, and you have discussed what it is that you want to see, hopefully by 2045, there may be obstacles and barriers to achieving this. So what action do you think needs to happen to put us on track? As Tracy asked, are we on track? And what action do we need to bridge that gap? If they are not addressing the issues of persons with diverse ability, children with special needs, if they're not addressing human rights and civil and political rights, if they're not addressing the education issues, healthcare issues, and so on and so forth, what needs to be done to put us on track? So we're starting with some questions, some points that are coming out. I see cooperation as a key action that has to take place. I see economic prosperity that is coming out. Let's keep the conversation going. What are the actions that must be done in the future? You spoke about actions that needs to be done, priority actions that needs to happen immediately. We need to also hear from you what needs to be done in the future. I see in the chat someone says communications, and we're going to unmute the mic, and you'll be talking a little bit more about why it is that you're saying that these ought to be the priority action. So we see economic prosperity seem to be jumping out of us. Laws are inclusive, free education, environmental protection, inclusiveness. There is an NHRI. I think whoever wrote that, sometimes we use acronyms, but maybe not everyone know what those acronyms are saying. So when we open the mic, or you can put it in the chat as to what NHRI is. We see accountability, we see fairness. Okay, so there is an NHRI, there's a National Human Rights Institute. That comes off of future priority action, environmental protection, free education up to tertiary level, innovative agriculture, accountability, tech services, security, cooperation, laws are inclusive, wow, there's quite a lot of priority actions that we're seeing coming out from this polling. So let's talk about opening up the mic. The mics are unmuting your mics. And if you can capture in a minute or so that we can get a few more responses in terms of why you're recommending to the UN75 as to what this future priority action ought to be to address the challenges that you have stated and which you have unearthed. Zana, do we have anyone? Do we have anyone on the mic? Unmuted.
We have Caleb.
All right, Caleb, can you share why you made that recommendation?
The NHI recommendation was accepted by government in 2009. I had to engage Minister Ellington in 2018 to just get him to instruct his technical people to find resources to do a feasibility study. That wouldn't have been done if I didn't push him a little faster to at least give life to the recommendation that the government accepted. And why is that important? Well, whether you're LGBT, sex worker, persons with disability, and the list goes on and on, not a single one of our institutions actually have any civil rights or political rights enforcement mechanism. And the hypocrisy is when they produced the Equal Opportunity Bill, there was a loud cry about the power of the commission and the tribunal, which was bullshit. And even more bullshit is how the government before he left office didn't take responsibility for ensuring that civil rights enforcement of all its citizens was upheld, and ignoring the homophobia, the gender bias that was expressed against the bill. Instead, they were complicit by indifference, omission, and inaction in letting the bill be removed from Parliament. Ridiculous. You can't say you're governing everybody and you decide you want to govern for a few people. It don't make any sense. So that's why.
So that would be certainly a future priority action that you would like to see. That's great. Could we have maybe one or two more persons, because what time is going to wind down? We did say it's a lunch hour, and so we're hoping for another 10 or 15 minutes to start, close, and to move towards winding down and closing. Do we have anybody else who wish to make a contribution at this time as to why they put out that future priority action? Anybody?
We have Ian.
Okay, Ian.
Hi, Miss Carolyn. I think education is a big issue, but for me, it's more following the data, following the research. Me personally have done research that have not seen the light of day, and I don't know why.
Okay.
And to me, that's an issue because we're doing this research. The last research I did was drug prevalence in countrywide high school. The data was not pretty, and I know the government hid it because it was sent to them. You understand? The
Okay.
OAS, that they provided all the financing for it. So I did it. And I know the end result. It was not a pretty research. It wasn't, looking like we are rosy and everything. We have issues. But the government never
Okay.
published the research. They never did come and tell us this is what we found and we have a problem. Let's try and fix it.
Okay.
Then
Excellent.
I had to wait.
Send me the paper.
So that's a great contribution. So we're looking at two key issues that have jumped out at us. One looking at human rights issues and one looking at education in terms of being priority issues for the future. So that poll was very, of course, revealing, and it will contribute to the overarching summary of what is it that Belizeans are saying regarding future priorities for the government and the United Nations as we move to address some of the challenges. And research as Ian has said, is very important. It's very key in terms of making decisions for strategic interventions to address these obstacles and barriers for us to deliver on those sustainable development goals. Now, one of the issues that is also confronting us is the partnerships and the cooperation that ought to take place in terms of addressing many of our challenges. We spoke of governance issues, and I've seen people speak of the UNCAC. We've spoken about human rights issues, and we've spoken about issues of diverse abilities and so on and so forth. Again, we've seen the organization speaks of the conventions that are respective to this. So clearly, the United Nations then, in terms of its role, has been playing a key role in terms of looking at some of these issues that are confronting us. So we want to start talking then, this is their 75th year. Clearly we are moving towards 2045. We often say, and I'm one of those persons who say 2020 is over. We're now in 2021. So what the next question then we want to start talking about is cooperation. Somebody did put that in the chat, in the polling, to say cooperation should also be a priority action. So cooperation takes place between countries, cooperation takes place between groups, cooperation takes place between people, between organizations, between sectors, between levels of government, and so on and so forth. So our key polling question for you then, is global cooperation through the United Nations vital to deal with the challenges of today and the future? Whether you're talking education, whether you're talking human rights, whether you're talking about issues of governance, whether you're talking about healthcare, addressing issues of persons with special needs, whether you're talking about environmental protection, healthcare, all the things that you have put in the poll, which speaks to the immediate priorities and which speaks to the future priorities, is global cooperation through the United Nations vital to deal with the challenges of today and tomorrow? And what I am seeing here is that I am not seeing any no, but I'm seeing all yes so far. So I ask you to continue to quickly put in through on the poll. We're moving towards the final component of this dialogue. I know we said lunch break, maybe we're having a longer lunch than normal. I'm hoping that you all can stay and continue for the next 10 to 15 minutes while we move and wind down the conversation to our closing. So far we've seen 6 persons have voted who have said yes. If you cannot click on the link, you can also put your answer the poll in the chat. That may be an easy and quicker way for many of you. Maybe the internet, as is happening in my neck of the woods, seems to be going and coming a little bit unstable. So if you can put in the chat the yes or the no by answering the polling question, is global cooperation through the United Nations vital to deal with the challenges of today and the future? These are the challenges that you have highlighted from the start of this conversation. We've seen that challenges are global, but challenges, even though global, they're also affecting us locally as a country, as a community, and as an individual. So we are seeing a majority of people saying yes. We ask that you continue to put the answer in the poll as we wind down and move on to our other question. So we're talking about the United Nations, global cooperation, and vital to deal with the challenges of today and the future. We want to do another poll, and this is our second to last poll. How would you describe the United Nations? Because the majority of you are saying that you see the United Nations as being vital to deal with the challenges of today and the future. So a poll then that follows this is, how would you describe the United Nations? Give us a word. how would you describe the United Nations? We are seeing a few words coming out already in the chat. So you can click on the poll, you can write in your word. It could be one word, maybe two, but what is that one word perhaps that you would want to describe the United Nations? Because we're saying it's vital. It's vital to the cooperation that is needed across sectors and across countries, across groupings, where it's across the government, civil society, groupings with specific interests. We're saying that all of that the UN is vital to bringing about and delivering on the future for 2045. So we want to see some words. We see progressive. We see efficient, bureaucratic. Some of that is in the choice. Unfriendly in design to grassroots organization. No choice, but to deal with the institutions. We see not on the ground equality and productive. We see them as a global partner. We see them as unreachable, but they're vital to our cooperation, for cooperation to deal with these issues. And so if you're saying this, then we need to start talking as well about how the United Nations can better manage these challenges. So what is it that the United Nations need to do to address some of the issues that you have highlighted? And if you are describing the United Nations in a particular way, based on the relationships that you have had with the UN, then what it is that we need, that the United Nations need to do to better manage these challenges and to deliver on those immediate actions that you have said and those priority actions. So I'm going to ask Zana to put in our last poll, and we'll have a wrap-up discussion on the role of the United Nations as this global partner and functioning in terms of creating the cooperation between countries and sectors, between the grassroots people, between the government, between civil society, looking at how you have described the United Nations, some using words progressive, others bureaucratic, some saying efficient, some others saying that they're unreachable and that they're not friendly to grassroots institutions. Then what would you recommend to the United Nations in terms of the changes that need to happen in order for them to better manage these challenges? So we're going to ask Zana to put that last question in the poll, and we will have open up the lines for a final word from each of the participants so that you can basically speak to why you have answered the poll in a certain way, and perhaps how you would advise the UN to better manage these challenges. So the poll is up, and I will read it again. How can the United Nations better manage these challenges? What are the challenges that you have indicated? You've spoken about education. You've spoken about human rights. You've spoken about responding to persons with diverse abilities. You've spoken about responding to the needs of children and persons with special needs. You've spoken about protecting the environment, about healthcare. You've spoken about issues of governance, corruption, accountability, transparency. So what it is that you would recommend to the United Nations to say, this is what you need to do to better manage these challenges that are confronting us today and the challenges that are going to confront us to the future, taking into consideration the priorities that you have identified for now and for the future. So we are seeing some great recommendations. Continue building partnerships with local stakeholders, local to global impacts, great. Engage more persons on the ground for cooperation, that is so good. By putting systems in place, let me see, all right, by putting systems in place to ensure countries are enforcing the conventions they sign on to. That is great. So we have 3 key recommendations coming out so far. We have a 4th. So let me repeat the 3 and then we have a 4th. So it's a continue building partnerships with local stakeholders, local to global impact. Engage more persons on the ground for cooperation by putting systems in place to ensure countries are enforcing the conventions they signed on to. Develop sectoral advocacy framework to improve rights advancement that is inclusive as a facilitator. So those are 4 key recommendations that have come out. Another one has come out. Need to ensure that nations are equitably taken out of poverty. Provide resources for countries to achieve the goals they have signed on to. Wow, these are great, some really great recommendations to the United Nations to better manage these challenges and to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. As Tracy, our UN representative that spoke to us in the first year, asked this big question: what kind of future do we want to create? Are we on track? What action is needed to bridge the gap? So you all have identified some key barriers and obstacles in terms of delivering on our SDGs, as well as delivering on these future priorities. And you're now speaking to the action that is needed to bridge the gaps or the deficiencies, to bring down the obstacles and barriers so that we can deliver on the priorities. So another one came up that says involvement of organization on the ground, post-UN projects follow up and evaluation. Wow. So these are 6 great recommendations that we have. And as we move to the last couple minutes of our dialogue, and we can all return back to the work that we do. As we had said, this is a lunch break, a protracted lunch break. But I think these 6 recommendations really captures the spirit of this dialogue and the spirit of hope. You know, most of you today said that you are optimistic about the future. You were saying that you think by 2045, the people of Belize and the world will be better off. The majority of you said that. But you're also saying that there are gaps, we're not on track with delivering on the SDGs as you all see it. And basically, these are the actions that you need to capture, to bridge that gap. Now, I'm going to just open the mics again for a final word from anyone who would wish to capture any lasting comment before I then ask that Zana, that will be closing off. So I'm going to ask Zana from UN to do a closing remark, and then I will close off this particular dialogue. But before we close off, I'm going to remind you also that there is an online UN75 survey that we're asking everyone to take. Zana is going to put that in the chat so that we can take that survey. So while you take the survey as well, we're just going to open up the mic, and we're going to ask anyone who would want to put in a lasting comment or a last word on their contributions to the dialogue. Anyone at this time, you can put it in the chat and you can unmute and take the mic. Zana, anyone opening up to capture a last word?
Not at the moment, Miss Carolyn.
Okay, so we're asking you to take the online survey. If you have a final comment you would like to make, please put it in the chat. If you want to have a comment and on the mic, you need to unmute and Zana will recognize that. In the meantime, please take the online survey that Zana has put in the link. And I'm going to ask Zana to put in the final word if we're not seeing anyone unmuting.
No one thus far, Miss Carolyn. So
Okay, so the
I'll just
last
wrap
word.
up.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, on behalf of the United Nations, I'd like to thank everyone who took out their time today to join us. We would definitely like to continue this conversation, not just for the end of this year, which is, UN75, but going into next year and the years coming forth. We will definitely be developing a report on all the conversations that we have. And since we have your contact information, specifically your email, we will be forwarding that to you. We definitely would like you to be involved in more conversations, more engagement opportunities, and likewise, if you'd like the United Nations to be a part of any campaigns, any conversations or dialogues, do feel free to invite us. Once again, thank you so much, and I hope you keep safe, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Zana. And once again, thank each and every one of you for taking your lunch hour to join us. We went a little bit protracted, but that is all good. Each and every one of your voice will be heard and certainly will be counted. If you have not linked on to the online survey, please do so. In addition, we are also conducting some what we call specific interest dialogues as we proceed with these conversations. If any of you have a specific interest or group of people who would want to participate in the dialogue so that your specific interest is going to be heard in that particular dialogue, feel free to contact us. CarolynTrench@gmail.com. My number is 670-0509. Please take the online survey. And if you have not registered for this dialogue but participated, please go back online and register so that we can ensure we have your email address and your contact information to know that you are documented, counted, and we can keep in touch with you. Once again, thanks to each and every one of you, and the dialogue continues to shape the future together. Thank you very much.